and welcome to Game and Read. We are matching here today to talk about our discussion and our pairing of the all-ages...
Picture book?
Yeah, it's children-friendly, but it's also for adults. Picture book Charlotte Wander On by Matthew Cubberley and Irina Kovalova did the illustrations. And we are pairing that today with Monument Valley, a 2014 iOS and mobile game by Us2 Games.
If you don't know anything about Charlotte Wander On or Monument Valley and you'd like a little backstory, introduction, before
Background.
you listen to us talk about them in relationship to each other, go check out our introduction video we posted a couple weeks ago. We just give an overview of the game and the book and provide a little background so we can hop right into the discussion.
Or better yet, go read and play them. They don't take very long.
That too.
We did the shortest pairing for the shortest month.
Yeah.
Anyway, Erin, how are you going to start us off today?
We are going to start with the ambiguity.
The role of ambiguity.
The role of ambiguity in these stories. So both Monument Valley and Charlotte Wander On focus on a young woman's journey that has these themes of loneliness and longing. In Charlotte Wander On, our protagonist is Charlotte. She is a young girl who leaves home to venture out and tries to find something. She is on a journey for an unknown treasure, and it is a lonely journey. She is going by herself. Her only companion is this book that her grandmother gave her, and it's a potentially dangerous journey.
Alternatively, in Monument Valley, we have Princess Ida, the princess of something or other, who has presumably taken the sacred geometry from this land or this world or this universe or this whatever. We're not sure because it's ambiguous. And she must return the sacred geometry to presumably restore order, is how I've always read it. And so she is going through these levels that are made up of impossible objects, very M.C. Escher inspired, very like optical illusion, like how many feet does the elephant have? Not quite like that, but you are manipulating these pathways that don't look like they will connect until you get a certain perspective, and then suddenly a new pathway is open. Ida can continue on to the next part of the level. There's no enemies, there's no danger really, it's just trying to figure out how to get to the next doorway to return these items. And during this, it's a very quiet game. There's not dialogue, there's not side characters, Ida doesn't talk ever. There's some kind of backgroundy music, but other than that, it's a very just kind of quiet and ongoing game, and you're like, what am I walking towards? I'm not sure. I guess we'll see. And it's just a very isolated experience for Ida and the player themselves.
What's interesting is that as these different ways ambiguity is used, it kind of leads into the difference in motivation between these two characters' journeys. So with Princess Ida, we interpret it as a story of redemption and a journey of redemption. So we kind of get this sense from this figure who kind of gives you a little bit of the background at the beginning. It's this figure that leads us to think that Ida has stolen the sacred geometry. And so Ida's journey is all about returning what she's stolen and righting the wrongs, and as we kind of think, restoring the order of this universe she's in. In a totally different way, Charlotte is motivated by her love of her family and particularly of her brother. She goes on this journey to try and find this unknown treasure, this hope, and she wants to help her brother, who presumably is dying or very ill or in some sort of...
They imply he's sick.
Dire straits. So her motivation is not necessarily about redemption, but of hope and also of curiosity. The very first drawing is her at this metal door that comes out of a hill. And she talks a lot about this, what is in the environment and things she sees on her journey. And it's a less depressing, not that Ida's journey is depressing, but there's a hope in Charlotte's journey that is not as prevalent in Ida's.
Well, she also expresses herself through language, whereas that is not present at all in Monument Valley. So it is hard to tell, maybe, but yes, there's definitely an expression of hope coming from Charlotte.
While we get some backstory for Charlotte and that her brother is presumably sick, she's on this journey to find a cure or something, and there's this hope. I think the ambiguity of Charlotte Wander On is almost too much. So we see and we read, but Matt Kuberly doesn't seem super interested in building a larger world, even though I think that there could have been a big, interesting world he could have detailed out.
I would be curious to see if he would write any other stories, even if they aren't necessarily related to this, in this same setting of sorts. I feel like there would be something interesting more to say in this concept he's dealing with here. He doesn't expand a lot on it. I don't want like a wiki of this world. I'm just kind of curious to see like what else the stuff is like, or maybe he just saw this as a brief fable and needed a setting for it, didn't really want to build a world.
I have to say that I think one aspect that for me left me wanting more is these plant creatures. They're like plant zombies.
They're on the cover.
They are present in a lot of Charlotte's journey, almost all of it, in fact. And at one point early, she basically says that people in her society think that they're dangerous and they're something to be feared. And she kind of questions that, and the book kind of questions that. And I would love just a little something more. Who are these people? Are they animals? What are they?
Well, there is a line in the book that seems to imply that they may be some sort of zombie. She definitely refers to them as no longer having life. Perhaps she was referring to, I mean, there's no dead bodies laying around in this book, but maybe she meant something like that, just post-apocalyptic type stuff. But they never really attack her. Mm-mm. She talks about people feeling threatened by them, and at a few times when she feels like giving up is kind of when they look like they're encroaching and she chooses to go on. So maybe they are like the manifestation of death, but they aren't going to just like pounce on you. They're like, hey, if you just give up on life, we'll like turn you into a zombie or something. That's kind of how I was reading into it, because clearly like there was no threat. She never fought them or anything like that, but they just kind of walk around and look menacing.
And I think this is a really good example of that. There's almost too much ambiguity in this story. It is, think the ambiguity is definitely an important part of it, but as an adult, we were a little confused reading it, and if it is
Aaron more than me.
Okay, I was confused about a couple things, but I think that is something, it is an all-ages picture book. I got confused, and I'm an adult that I feel like is fairly smart, and so I just feel like it was not quite enough to get a good handle on what was happening.
Yeah, that is definitely a fair comparison. How do you feel about Monument Valley and how that shakes up compared to Charlotte Wander On?
So Monument Valley is also really ambiguous. And I have mixed feelings and I want to hear your thoughts.
I'm going to respond to yours because we already talked about this.
Monument Valley, the world doesn't need the story. So that doesn't bother me that the story is ambiguous. However, they give you part of the story and then they don't give you anything else. And I just wanted some more. Even though the story didn't need it. Or the game didn't need it.
I'm going to argue that I'm very happy with how little of a narrative they put in there. The fact that they put something in there but not much. And that is because this is a game very focused on the aesthetic of it. It's not incredibly challenging. It's not incredibly long. There's nothing to really pull you in other than how everything looks and kind of just how you interact with this interesting world. And I think trying to create a more strict narrative would be, putting a more rigid flow on something built around impossible objects, around things that don't actually make sense. And I feel like it's hard to marry those two things together. So I think having a goal and having this kind of vague tale of trying to right a wrong you have done is enough to get you through the game and the experience and feeling better about it at the end. So if there was no story, there's nothing really necessarily to pull you in there at the beginning other than like just tap, move your little person because it wouldn't be Ida anymore.
Right.
But if there's too much more, I feel like it would have lost my interest, and I was more interested in like, here's the concept, now just go through the whole thing and reflect on it. So that's why I like the amount in it. You are obviously free to disagree with me, as is anyone else, but that's how I feel.
So, how do you feel about the pairing of Charlotte Wanderon and Monument Valley?
Okay, but a qualified okay. I think they're both very enjoyable short experiences based around a strong, well, not necessarily even strong, but an independent young woman or girl.
A woman who isn't tied
There's literally no other people
to
in these
anyone
stories.
else. And that, I think that is a really neat?
So,
Yeah.
yeah, on that theme, they fit well because it's just like, okay, that's a very abstracted theme. I would say aesthetically they are so different. Monument Valley is like detailed and minimalist at times, and it's really, it's an aesthetic I prefer. Whereas Charlotte Wanderon is much more illustrated painting and kind of a darker take on a children's book. I think it's well done, but that's where they kind of really draw apart. And I think since the visual is so important to each medium, they kind of just start separating right from the get-go.
And I agree. I think that one aspect that makes them a nice pairing is the use of imagery. Obviously, with a game, it's usually going to need visuals to
Generally.
convey the story or convey the experience. But I think Charlotte Wanderon also used the images. Irina Kovalova is the illustrator, and I thought her work was really nice in enhancing the experience and giving you little tidbits that the writing didn't. Now, I missed those tidbits.
Well, it's supposed to be, you gotta do them together. That's the whole point of having pictures, is that they help tell part of the story.
So I'm working on that
Erin's
one.
a really good reader. She's not the best comics and visual media reader.
But I also agree with your assessment that the styles are so different, and the stories share that protagonist of an independent young girl, a journey, almost a fearlessness in both characters, because I can infer that Ida, if she's returning sacred geometry she stole at one point, has to have some sort of courage.
And based on how it's set up, it looks like the world is literally falling apart. So if the world doesn't normally look like these crazy 3D images, she's probably like, well, this is just totally nuts. How do I correct this?
And there's a couple points in Charlotte Wanderon that the illustrations definitely convey this sense of chaos and darkness and like
hopelessness at a couple points, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that they fit well. They fit well in some parts, but then they're totally different in others, and
their motivations are really where you start to see a difference. With Charlotte Wanderon, it is very much she has a goal to meet to do something right by her brother, and just the sake of trying to explore this world that she's kind of been blocked off from, quarantined from, for her own safety. And she does reflect on that a little bit, bemoaning how the people who live in wherever she came from, underground, they're safe, but are they actually living? And that kind of jazz. Whereas Ida is very much more a redemptive thing. It doesn't feel like a big adventure. It feels like, okay, I need to correct this. I've done something wrong, and that's why it's a bit more pensive, a bit more mournful, I think, at times. Whereas Charlotte Wanderon is kind of like a hopeful adventure that hits hopelessness and then rebounds and is a good kid's book because of it.
Agreed. So I'd say what, a B pairing?
Yeah, it's better than some we've done. It's not as good as others. So yeah, it was fine. But they're both good independently. I would highly recommend either one. Especially if you're looking into like unusual picture books. This is definitely one to pick up. It's interesting, but it's not scary.
No.
If you're worried about that for younger kids, it's really not that scary. There are these monsters, they never actually do anything too frightening other than just kind of lurk around, a la boogeymen of sorts.
So that is our February pairing of Charlotte Wanderon and Monument Valley.
Yes, if you like this video, you can see all of our other videos on our YouTube page and all of our other blog posts, videos, podcasts on GameAndRead.com.
You can also keep up with us on social media. We are on Twitter, Instagram, Litzy, and Facebook at Game and Read.
Thanks for watching.
And we'll see you next time.